CNN10 Script, Friday, September 27th, 2024, School 107, The Collapse of Affordable Internet, May 3rd, 2024. Reading aloud. What's up, party people? I'm Cold Wire. This is CNN10. Happy Friday. Before we get started, let's go on and show our teachers some love. Tell them to push that pause button, give them a handshake, a high five, a bro hug, and just a squeeze. Let them know you appreciate them. Alright, let's get you your news. As many as 60 million Americans will have to pay more for their internet bills. This is after a government program they rely on runs out of funding. It's called the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, and it passed in 2021 as part of a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Low-income Americans could apply to the ACP and receive up to $30 per month to help pay for the internet. The ACP started with $14 billion, but is now set to run out of money by the end of this month. Some lawmakers from both parties want to put more money into the ACP, but so far, efforts have stalled in Congress. President Joe Biden and other advocates for the bill, including some internet companies, say the ACP funding is vital to help low-income Americans access everything from telemedicine to online classes. But many conservative Republicans are upset about how much money the government is spending on programs like the ACP, putting America further into debt. And the commissioner of the FCC says, quote, "The money has run out," unquote. Without Congress stepping in, the ACP will expire at the end of May. That will force millions of Americans to pay more for their internet or lose their connectivity. Next up, the unrest happening on college and university campuses across the United States has continued this week, even as officials have expelled students and police have arrested hundreds of protesters. Although these images may look scary, as CNN's Brian Todd shows us, the recent student protests have actually been largely peaceful, especially when you compare them to college protests of the past. 1968, student protesters at New York's Columbia University take over several buildings and briefly even take the dean hostage. One of the buildings they seized, Hamilton Hall, which students occupied during recent protests at Columbia. 1968, the first time it was occupied, Hamilton Hall was the scene of a dramatic police action that resulted in the arrest of 700 people. Those protests against the Vietnam War have been taking place for years on college campuses across America and would continue for a few more years, from Columbia to Cal Berkeley to Kent State. Now, in 1969, student protesters at Harvard took over and occupied University Hall, marching school officials out of the building. The primary difference between then and now, the scale of the violence. While skirmishes have broken out at UCLA and some other campuses during the current demonstrations, these protests have been for the most part peaceful. In the Vietnam era, violence broke out routinely, and on many campuses, students often brawling with police, disciplining students, calling in the police, having protests removed that tended to increase the sympathy for protesters, build the size of protests, and also increase the voice of more extreme activists. In two horrific episodes, the Vietnam era violence turned deadly. In May 1970, on the campus of Kent State University, Ohio National Guard troops opened fire on student protesters, killing 4 of them and injuring several others. Days later, during racial injustice protests at Jackson State College in Mississippi, police fired at a dormitory, killing 2 students and injuring a dozen others. Possibly a closer comparison to what's going on now took place in the 1980s when students across America protested against apartheid in South Africa. They called on schools to divest themselves from companies, groups that supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, much like students are now calling on colleges to divest themselves from Israeli-linked company. Another dynamic that hasn't changed across these eras of protest. They got a lot of energy and they're idealistic and they like to protest when things feel unjust or seem unjust to them. 10-second trivia. What is the collective name for single-celled microscopic organisms that live in the soil, water, and animals? Bacteria, blood, DNA, or virus? Answer is bacteria. The number of bacteria. Did you know that if you have in mouth is more than the total number of humans on Earth? That is wild.